The Macedonian dynasty is often considered to be the high point of Eastern Roman wealth, power and influence, as the defeat at Manzikert and the subsequent civil wars and destruction greatly weakened the empire. The Komnenians took charge in 1081, managing to reverse the fortunes of the state in the century that followed. Despite this great reversal of fortunes, the Komnenians are often charged with mismanaging several aspects of the administration, leading to the weakening of the state, which, after the usurpation by the Angeloi, was plunged in even greater hardships that culminated in the Fourth Crusade. There is, however, an interesting catch to all of this. Despite the political instability both in the interior and the exterior during the late Komnenian and Angeloi dynasty, the archaeological findings during the period are intriguing. An unprecedented economic boom during the 11th and 12th centuries is attested, a boom that, in contrary to common belief, led to the destabilization of the Eastern Roman Empire instead of its strengthening in the long run. In this video, we'll attempt to shed light into the essence of the late Komnenian economy and statecraft, showcasing how the booming economy of Eastern Rome could support the actions of a superpower, with vassals and spheres of influence in the Eastern Mediterranean and Europe under Manuel Komnenos, but at the same time lead to political fragmentation just 20 years later. Our analysis will be based on historian Alan Harvey's research. Through the data provided by Harvey's analysis, coupled with our own additions of factual evidence, we'll examine the proofs and causes of this economic boom and how it paradoxically led to political fragmentation instead of prosperity. Having set up this framework, we'll fit the historical timeline of the late Komnenian period up to 1204. To validate the claim that the economic boom of the Eastern Roman Empire led to its fragmentation, it is necessary to prove the existence of such a boom. This will not be done through estimating state revenues. In case of a loosely controlled domain, high economic output does not mean high revenues for the state. On the contrary, we'll try to support this boom through demographic and monetary expansion coupled with cultural and building output. Demographically, the rise of peasant numbers both in villages and in aristocratic and monastic estates during the Komnenian period can attest to a general population growth in the peripheries. Monasteries increased the size of their estates and their monk population. For example, Megisti Lavra held lands across multiple themes, while the monastic community of Pathmos, a small island in the Aegean, was recorded to have a population of 150 monks by 1196. Indirectly, the rise of the monastic communities indicates a rise of the general population as well. As for the general population, some evidence can be found again in the archives of the Megisti Lavra monastery. For example, the village of Hostiani, acquired by Lavra as a monastic estate in the mid-11th century. At that point, there were 12 pariki living there, basically dependable peasants. By 1186, the population rose to 62 zavgarati, or full peasant households, owning a team for ploughing. This pattern is implied to be similar in other villages as well. The population seems to have been on a rise in provincial cities in mainland Greece too, a fact that indicates also a rise of rural population. For example, Thessaloniki is mentioned to have a population of at least 500 Jews and a huge open market, while Larissa is also a strong center, managing to withstand long sieges. Monetarily, there is evidence of increased monetary circulation around the Greek provinces during the era, especially in Corinth and Athens. In Athens, 1500 coins were found dated from the 10th to the 11th century. In comparison, 4,000 of them were found dated only from the reign of Manuel Komnenos. Corinth also experiences a rise in coin circulation, with thousands of coins found for the Komnenian period, with a sharp increase after the reign of Theophilos. The port of Corinth, ERE, also sees an important increase to 44 coins found for the 10th to the 12th centuries, in contrast to just one from the 8th to 9th centuries. Now on a building level, many churches are dated from the 11th and 12th centuries, especially in southern Greece. Archaeological evidence is relatively scarce in earlier periods, and there is a profound lack of important buildings from the area of central and southern Greece and from other rural provinces of the empire in general. However, during the 11th and 12th centuries, many churches seem to have been built, indicating thriving communities. Such are cases like the Gümüşler monastery in Asia Minor, which seems to have thrived during the late Komnenian period. The St. Averkios monastery in Bithynia, dating from 1162. The Kesariani and Daphne monasteries in Athens from the 11th century. And several churches in the Peloponnese, as is the case for Kalamata, where at least 5 of them survive to this day from the Komnenian period. Additionally, many regional ports seem to have also risen in significance during this period. Those include Monevartia, Koroni, Methoni and Patras, among others, where fortifications are built or constructed and traffic is largely increased. With this evidence at hand, the economic boom seems clear. But how did this economic model function? The existence of large estates seems to have been the main driver of this boom, as the accommodation of more and more peasants in bigger structures would allow for the cultivation and production of more elaborate goods, not just subsistence farming. An independent free farmer could not focus on elaborate products, as he would risk his own family's survival. Olive oil and wine are examples of such products, very common for this period, whose production would hardly be possible in the absence of such estates. Those products would in turn be sold in regional markets. Those markets would also grow as a result and attract traders from abroad or the capital, driving thus the rise of a consumer economy, targeting the wealthy landowners of the periphery who would seek for luxury goods in return for their agricultural produce. Additionally, subsistence products would also prove valuable during this period, as the Komnenians would maintain a really high military expenditure over most of their dynastic rule. Campaigns against the Seljuks, the peoples of the steppes, or Western powers are very common throughout this era. Thus the central government would buy agricultural products from regional markets, driving their growth even more. The central government's role would prove even more crucial within this self-reinforcing loop. Strong emperors would demand taxes, but what they offered in return would be very, very valuable: stability. The growth of the estates and the prosperity of the farmers relied on the lack of raids and wars within the empire's interior. As long as the central state could provide this stability, the wealthy peripheral elite that was slowly being formed under those conditions would remain content and in line with government policy. A relationship of mutual trust was slowly being formed on these premises. Constantinople no longer appointed local officials with small terms, as was the case in earlier eras. In contrast, regional offices became unofficially hereditary, and their holders were either locals or men who essentially became locals after several years or even generations of local appointments. This entire system, however, proved strikingly fragile. The weakening of the central government with the rise of Andronikos Komnenos and the subsequent usurpation by the Ageli dynasty broke the trust of the local elites towards Constantinople, not just in an impersonal level, but even in a more practical one. The weak emperor that followed Manuel Komnenos failed to address external raids effectively. The Norman sack of Thessalonica, the increased Seljuk raids in Asia Minor, the Bulgarian rebellion, and the silent encroachment of Genoa in the Greek mainland were all symptoms of an ineffective government, a government that local elites refused to obey. Several independent warlords thus emerged. Theodore Magafas in Asia Minor, Leos Gouros in the Peloponnese, Leo Gavalas in Rhodes, and Isaac Komnenos in Cyprus, just to name the better recorded ones. As expected, the existence of all these independent magnates, essentially local warlords, transformed the reinforcing loop into a downward spiral. The central government lost more and more power, becoming vulnerable even to total collapse, and ultimately culminated in the Fourth Crusade and the sack of 1204. After the Muslim conquests during the Heraclean dynasty, Byzantium was in a constant state of alert. Raids in all parts of Roman territories were common, not only on the Asia Minor frontier, but also in Greece after the Muslim conquest of Crete. Slowly but surely, the military resurgence during the Macedonian dynasty created more stable conditions for the imperial heartlands, especially after the reconquest of Crete by Nikephoros Phocas. The newfound stability led to population growth and the subsequent growth of noble or monastic estates, as farmers would now be plenty and could work without distractions from external raids. This led to the increased power of the Dinati, the literal strongmen of the Byzantine world. Their power increased rapidly, and the imperial administration led efforts to suppress them, similarly with the case under Basil the Bulgar Slayer, either by force or by favoring the lower classes. This effort, however, was not sufficient. After the death of Basil, the Dinati re-emerged. The shock caused by the defeat at Manzikert and the subsequent chaos essentially forced the government to side again with the Dinati in order to ensure the internal stability to deal with external threats. Based on this aristocracy, the Komnenians ensured that the empire bounced back after the crisis. If the initial years of Alexis Komnenos' reign are to be excluded, internal peace was ensured for 100 years, more than enough time for the local elites to accumulate power under the new system described previously. This power enabled the elites to establish a quasi-feudal system in the once bureaucratically administered territories. Many of them were directly appointed by the emperors. Theodoros Gouros, for example, the father of the rebel Leos Gouros, had been a companion of Emperor Andronikos Komnenos before he was appointed as governor of Nafplion. Under Manuel Komnenos, the imperial machinery ran on full steam. The enrichment of the local elite, coupled with strong imperial administration, allowed for large expenditure on the army, which transformed Eastern Rome into a true superpower of the era. However, once the Komnenian dynasty came to its abrupt end with a public execution, everything fell apart as described in a matter of just 20 years. The Eastern Roman Empire, after the fall of the Komneni dynasty, became a victim of its own success. The external stability allowed for the accumulation of wealth. However, the nature of this growth led to the rise of a new economic elite in the peripheries, an elite which demanded stability in order to continue prospering. Once the emperors failed to provide this stability, this elite rebelled, establishing their own semi-independent domains. Since they could not accumulate more wealth, those elites sought status, in one more example of elite overproduction. Can it be claimed, however, that economic success is a breeding ground for destruction? This can be answered by examining the specific conditions that differentiated the Byzantine society during the era. The Romans, before this economic growth, were employing a system of imperial administration to manage their domains, but the local power of the elites slowly turned this system into a form of feudalism. Thus, a society that was not prepared for feudalism slowly spiraled into it, without the conditions that sustained it in Western Europe. In conclusion, the Komneni didn't destroy the state from within, as it is usually claimed. Trade privileges to the Italian republics or over-reliance on mercenaries was not enough to weaken the state. On the contrary, they might have even ensured its prosperity. What they failed to address was something much more complex: the slow transformation of the Eastern Roman Empire into a Western-style feudal kingdom, a process that not even the most capable rulers could address.